Hello, welcome to Block 5, Fraction, Decimal and Percentage Equivalence, Lesson 2. I'll share my screen. So, in your previous lesson, you learned how to represent tenths and hundredths on the 100 square grid. So, you represented it as diagrams and you were able to see how you could represent, for example, you saw that 3/10 is the same thing as 30 hundredths. In today's lesson, you're going to learn how to represent tenths and hundredths on number lines. This is a very important skill that will help you in the future when you want to choose appropriate scaling, especially really fractional scaling in plotting graphs and in other aspects of science. But before we start, I want to draw your attention to something really baffling. Thousands of people are enjoying and learning from these videos, but they're not subscribers yet. So I want to ask you for a favor. Please click on the notification bell, subscribe to the channel, and like the videos. Tell others to use the videos and learn from them, so that you can support our mission of educating the global population of children. If you do me this favor, my promise to you is that we will continue to produce high quality education videos for children to learn mathematics at no cost. Thank you. Before we start, I would like you to do these retrieval practice questions. You can pause the video and answer the questions in 3 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've worked through the questions, here are the answers. The first question, you were asked to work out the difference between 30 and 50. Difference, remember, means, there was a lesson where I talked about the meaning of this word. Difference in mathematics means to subtract. So to work out the difference between 30 and 50 means to do 50 minus 30, which is equal to 20. Next, you were asked to work out 20 divided by 5. 20 divided by 5 is equal to 4, because using your multiplication knowledge, 4 times 5 or 4 multiplied by 5 is equal to 20. Next, we were asked to fill in the missing labels on the number line. We're going to be doing lots of these in this lesson. And if you remember, there was a lesson where we looked at, or we learned how to fill missing labels on number lines having to do with integers. So the first thing we'll do, the way we work out missing values in intervals, is to divide 30, is to subtract 30 from 50. So we need to find the value between 30 and 50. We already know that is 20. Now, the next thing we need to do is to count our number of intervals. We can see that our intervals are between these, our intervals are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 5 intervals between 30 and 50. So to find out the value of each interval, we're going to do 20, the difference between 30 and 50, divided by the number of intervals. So each interval is equal to 4. So we can use that knowledge to fill the missing labels. Now, not forgetting the missing labels before 30, we can count backwards in 4, which will give us those values there. Let's do some new learning. If I ask you to represent a tenth on this bar model, what would you do? Of course, you would split this bar model into 10 equal parts. So a tenth will be one part of the bar model shaded. Remember, a tenth is 1 divided by 10. If we represent the same on an equivalent number line, we're going to get a number line of equal width as this bar from 0 to 1, and then that should be a tenth. If we shade the second one, that will be 2 tenths, 3 tenths, and so on and so forth. Okay? All right. What about this? If we have from 0 to 1 tenth, how would we feel in these missing labels in the number line? Well, we know the difference between the start of the number line and the end of the number line is 1 tenth. And we have 10 equal intervals between these values. So we're going to do 1 tenth divided by 10 to give us the value of each interval. Now, at this stage, you're going to use your knowledge of the fact that 10 hundredths are equivalent to 1 tenth. And here we have 1 tenth. So it means here we're going to be having 100ths, 200ths, so on and so forth. And that is what we get. So that will be 100th, 200th, and so on and so forth. Okay? What about this one? What do we do? Well, we know that the difference between 7 tenths and 8 tenths is 1 tenth. But we have 10 intervals between the values 7 tenths and 1 tenth. And if you recall, when we did our 100 squares grid, knowing how to represent tenths and hundreds in the 100 squares grid, we learned that 7 tenths is the same thing as 70 hundredths. So we can use that knowledge to start to fill in the values. So 7 tenths is 70 hundredths and 8 tenths is 80 hundredths. So we can place these values there because we know the next one will be 71 hundredths, 72 hundredths, so on and so forth until you get to 79 hundredths. Right, so what we have learned so far before you do some practice questions is that you can use your skill of knowing how to find the missing values of the intervals on a number line and your knowledge of how to represent tenths and hundredths and their equivalents to find out the missing values on a number line, which you have to represent tenths and hundredths on. Here is question 1. Pause the video and answer question 1 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 1, here is the answer. So by now, you should know how to put values on a number line. So this we move gradually from integers down to the tenths. And here, we're asked to draw arrows to show the position of the numbers on the number line. So by now, you should know that these are written in words. You should be able to represent them in the number line. And here are the answers. Here is question 3. Answer the question in 3 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and answered the question, here are the answers for question 3A and B. Here you were asked what fractions are the arrows pointing to. Okay, so we know between 0 and 1 we have 10 intervals. So if we divide 1 by 10, it means each interval is 1/10. So that should tell us why this is 3/10 and this is 7/10. Then here we have between 20 hundredths and 30 hundredths, the difference is 10 hundredths. So if we divide 10 hundredths by 10, it means each of these value is 1/10. So we know 1/10 is the same thing as 10 hundredths. So each of these is different by, so that would be 21 hundredths, 22 hundredths, 23 hundredths, so on and so forth. Okay. This is the answers to questions to 3C and D. So here we have the difference between 2/10 and 3/10 is 1/10. So if we divide by 10 intervals, we're going to have 1/10 divided by 10 will be 1/100. And we know that 2/10 is the same thing using our grid. Our knowledge of the 100 square grid is 20 hundredths. So if that's 20 hundredths, that will be 21 hundredths, 22 hundredths, and 23 hundredths. And that will be 29 hundredths. Here we use the same knowledge to do the same. So this one, if that is 70 hundredths, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75. Now, just in case you're wondering why it is 3/4, 75 hundredths is 75 divided by 100. Now, if you simplify this, we can divide 75 by 25, which will give us 3. And we can divide 100 by 25, which will give us 4. Okay? All right. And that one you should know that is 79 hundredths. Okay. What about these? What difference do you notice and what's the same? Well, we notice that they all refer to the same value. They're all 17 hundredths. But what's different is they represented in different forms. So, if we think about it, 17 hundredths is the same thing here as in words. So this is represented as a fraction. This is represented as a decimal. This is represented in a place value chart. And this is represented in words. But what about this? Have you noticed that the place value chart does not seem to show 17 hundredths? It's showing 1/10 here and here 7 hundredths. Well, we can use the knowledge of our fact that 1/10 is equal to 10 hundredths. So if we do an exchange where we take this counter and exchange it for 10 hundredths, then we'll now have 17 hundredths here. That is one of the difference you would notice. Okay. Here is another example. How would you draw an arrow to show the position of 37 hundredths on the number line? Well, we can do that first by putting the labels on the number line. So by now, we know how to put labels on the number line. We know that 3/10 is the same thing as 30 hundredths. If you remember your knowledge of the 100 square grid. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's important that you watch the lesson before this one. And then we know that 4/10 is same thing as 40 hundredths. So 37 hundredths will definitely be closer to 40 hundredths. Okay, it's now time for you to do some practice. So what have we learned so far? We have learned that you can represent you can represent 37 hundredths, values such as 37 hundredths and other values using your knowledge of the equivalence between tens and hundreds. And then you can combine that with your knowledge of working out the values of the intervals on a number line. Pause the video and answer questions 4 and 5 in 3 minutes. All right, assuming you've paused the video and you've worked through the questions, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. For question 3, you were asked, draw arrows to show the position of the numbers on the number line. So in other words, you were being asked to position the values in the correct position. So we see here we have between 0 and 1, we have 10 intervals. So if we divide 1 by 10, it means each interval is worth 1/10. So that has to be 0.2 because 0.2 as a decimal is 2/10. That should be 8/10 and that should be 7/10. So 7/10 is 7/10 or 0.7. So 7 divided by 10. That's what I mean as over 10. Number 5, Ron says he has labeled 15/10 on the number line. Whitney says that he's wrong and that he cannot label 15/10 on this number line. Who do you agree with? Of course, we agree with Whitney because 15/10 is actually greater already than 1. It's greater than 1. So, and we know our number line is between 0 and 1. So, Ron is wrong. Question 6 and 7. Pause the video and answer questions 6 and 7 in 4 minutes. Here, assuming you pause the video and work through the questions, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. Here you were asked to write your answers as tens. So you were asked what numbers are the arrows pointing to. So we know that we have between 0 and 1, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 10 intervals. So by now, we should know how to represent these values as tens. So we know that it's going to be 4/10 because each of the interval, we get the value of each of the interval by dividing 1 by the number of intervals. So it's 1/10. So that will be 4/10 and that will be 9/10. This will be 14/10. Okay, just making our progress in that fashion because this will be 11/10, 12, 13, and then that one will be 19/10. Question 7, you were asked to draw an arrow to show the position of 77 hundredths. Now, we know that the value between 7 tenths and 8 tenths is 1/10. So the difference between them is 1/10. And we know that we have 10 intervals. So if we have 10 intervals, we can divide 1/10 by 10. And 1/10 divided by 10 will be 100ths. Now we can use the fact that 7/10 is 70 hundredths and 8/10 is 80 hundredths. So using that knowledge, that will be 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77 hundredths. Okay. All right, let's move on. question 8, you were asked to draw and label arrows for numbers A and B on the number line. Well, for numbers A and B, we'll talk about this. So pause the video and answer this in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. For question 8, here we can see that this is 2/10 and 4/100. So if we use our knowledge, okay, 2/10 and 4/100 mean 0. Okay, 2/10 and 400 mean 400 mean 0.24. So this value should be representing 0.24. Now we know this will be 20 hundredths. So if this is 20 hundredths and this is 30 hundredths, 0.24 should be closer to 20 hundredths. B, we know that this is 4/10 and 2 hundredths. So the value is, when we write it in figures, is 0.42. Now we know that this is this is 40 hundredths. So this represents 42 hundredths, so it should be closer to 40 hundredths. And then to draw the counters for C, we can see that C is halfway, all right? Thinking about how we've written this so far, that's 40 hundredths, 50 hundredths, 60 hundredths, 70 hundredths, 80 hundredths, and then this is 90 hundredths. So this is halfway, so it should be 85 hundredths. So it means we're going to have 85 hundredths will be 80 tenths. So you can see 8 tenths. So you can see we have 8 tenths, right? And 5 hundredths. Okay? So 8 tenths and 5 hundredths. 8 tenths, 8 tenths here, 5 hundredths. Okay. That brings us to the end of our lesson. So what we've learned so far is we have learned to combine our knowledge of knowing how to find the values of the intervals on a number line with our knowledge of how to represent tenths and hundredths both in decimal and in fractional form, and how to work out the equivalence to complete and represent tenths and hundredths on a number line. I hope you've learned a lot from this lesson. If it's not clear to you, please watch the lesson before this one and watch this lesson again and do some more practice. It's a very important skill that will help you in the future in your expanding knowledge and understanding of maths. Until next time, take care and bye-bye.